So, Leroy Patterson, thank you so much for letting me do this interview. You've had an amazing career. You've done some incredible stuff, which we're going to talk about. You were on the Go Big Show, America's Got Talent. You wrestled for XPW. You had a match on AEW Dark recently that Taz was a huge fan of. Um,
That's one way to put it.
yeah, but it all started with backyard wrestling. And so I wanted to ask you, how did you discover backyard wrestling?
So in high school, I was mutual friends with someone who he loved wrestling. I loved wrestling. We started tape trading, right? We were, getting some old like FMW stuff sent. We were like right way into it back in the day. And he hit me up and he was like, "Hey, a friend of mine is doing a backyard wrestling show. It sounds crazy. It sounds right up your alley. You should go." I was like, "All right, great." So I went. It was. Can we curse?
Go ahead.
It was a clusterfuck, right? It was chaotic. There was no match structure. It was just like 12 guys in a backyard just doing wrestling moves onto like one mattress. And so I was like, all right, yeah, this is fun. And I went and I like picked someone up over my head and threw them, and people thought that was crazy. I dove off the roof and people were going nuts for it. So like it was something that I was like, I love this. This is great, but we could do more with it. This is, it was just a 40-minute match of 12 guys beating each other up to, Rob Zombie or something. And so it was definitely chaos, but I was like, we could take this and mold it into something like more, because this was like right on the cusp of it going big. This was like right before it hit and took off on news everywhere, and so it was like me and five other people, and we had matches. The matches were just god awful, right? But it was all learning. It was all like building what we know and how to do this, and so we just kind of built from there, and then it became like pretty big by the end of it.
That's awesome. Now were you just a wrestler or did you do any like booking? Did you come up with creative or were you just there as like a talent?
So me and my tape trading buddy, he probably doesn't want to be involved with backyard wrestling anymore, so I'm not gonna say his name. But he loved the booking aspect of it. So we did all the shows at my house. My dad loved building stuff, just random. He built like catapults and like whatever. Like he loved just working with his hands and building really fun, cool stuff for everyone. So he built us a ring in the backyard eventually. It was like a layer of tires, it was a layer of like carpet, and then sometimes we'd have like a tarp down, but that if it got too like moisturey at night, it was like super slippery. So we had different iterations of this ring. So I handled stuff like making sure the ring was set up, making sure that we had ample seating, and then I wrestled, and then I helped a little with the booking, but like it was mostly him. He was way into the whole like he wanted to be Paul Heyman, like he wanted to be Paul D Dangerous, he was all about that life, and he wrestled too every now and then, but he was mostly about the behind the scenes stuff, and I was making sure it was talent relations. I was meeting new people. I was very sociable, so like
Awesome. Yeah, I was
so I
gonna
handled
ask.
those aspects, and then yeah, but together we were definitely a team, and put together some really cool shows.
Awesome. Yeah, I was gonna ask like how do you go about finding people to backyard wrestle? It's like, hey, you want to come do this incredibly fun, you also incredibly dangerous thing?
So yeah, we took like five of the people from that first backyard wrestling match in my friend's backyard, and they joined, and they were all like seeing them grow as wrestlers, and from just like crap to like wow, they're actually really good, and they wanted to they can go on to the pros, and some did. Like some of the people that I wrestled with, I'm not gonna name them because who wants to be called out like that, but some people who have held like titles in AEW and WWE I backyard wrestled with, and there's people who are still performing right now that I've they went to my 14th birthday party, and we iced each other's friggin' wounds because we did something really stupid into a brick wall or whatever. But so to see like everyone go from where we were to where they are now is so neat. But yeah, a lot of it came from either like word of mouth. We'd have those original six or seven guys, and then they had friends who were interested, so we'd come in, kind of let them do a tryout match, and if they were cool, then yeah, they'd keep coming back, and if not, and it's like, well, yeah, thanks so much, and that was a ton of fun, and we're gonna do another one if you want to come watch, and we were, as far as I know, we didn't really hurt any feelings. That was always the like we didn't want to like piss anyone off.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then we ended up getting kind of big enough to where our group linked with like the 12 other groups in SoCal, and so it got to a point where people would be like, "Hey, could we have a match on your card?" And then it got so out of control that it was like, "Yo, we've got 80 people to choose from. 80 really talented, really great, like really funny, right? They're either incredibly funny or they're doing like, 720 flips off the roof into fire, like we had all these different things to pick from, and it became this really neat community where every single weekend we'd be putting on these wild shows and having these like insane setups, and you never know what you got when you went to someone else's place. It could be this like a real ring in this like really elaborate area, or it could be like one mattress surrounded by like a loose strain of barbed wire and next to someone's pool. Like it was such a neat, eventually it became such a community that we could pull from, that it's like we didn't have to worry about finding someone to do it because there was more than enough people to pick from.
That's awesome, man. And then you guys would have like crowds come to you guys would have like an audience to perform in front of, right?
Yeah, word of mouth spread, and we started with like one or two watchers, and then it became 10 or 20, and then by the final show, it was at least 100 watching. And then we had in our area, at least, we had a a backstage area that had a monitor set up so that people knew when to hit their cues and people knew when, what was going on and could watch the show while they're working out their stuff in the back. So it became kind of like I mean, it's backyard wrestling, but we treated it like it was a professional thing. And that has helped with so many other different aspects since then. But yeah, it was definitely a big production that we put on, and people were going nuts for it, and just the roar of the crowd, and it just popping for crazy stuff and popping for the dumb stuff, and like it was great.
Awesome. Yeah, does having that audience there like motivate you to be like, let's do something even bigger, let's do something even crazier?
Yeah, that became an issue because every single show, people wanted to outdo someone from the last show, and it got really intense to the point where it's like, dude, someone's gonna die. Like we are. So it started. People are doing moves, and then someone goes to a table, and you're like, oh my god, that was awesome. And then it's like a table with thumbtacks on it, and you're like, oh crap, that's crazy. And then like someone does it off the roof through a table, and you're like, holy shit. And then someone does a running sit out power bomb off the roof, and you're like, oh my god, But that was all into the ring. Now someone does a running, like we call it the pentagram, where it's like the modest driver, but one, you're holding the dude's legs up here and the head down here, and then you run and like slam them on their back kind of thing. They did that off the roof to the floor, like just to like the dirt. And then I tried to top that by going off the neighbor's two-story house onto a guy that was stacked onto two doors. And so he's on the top one, and I went off it was like my final backyard match because I was going pro. And I dove off the neighbor's two-story roof, and so like we were just every single show was like there was at least 4 or 5 people who were trying to top each other every single time, and it became this like arms race of like, let's not die, but let's do something insane.
Yeah, that was similar to us. We would put on shows at this park down the street from my high school, and kids from my school would come to watch every week.
Yeah.
And so it was a thing where it's like every week we would try something, and then word of mouth would spread, and more people would come. So then
Yep.
it's like, I'm gonna light this chair on fire and hit you with it, and now we're gonna
Mhm.
slam on the thumbtacks. And it got to a point where we're like, okay, there's a ceiling.
Yeah.
We can only push things so far, and we had to start like weaning ourselves and our audience like off of all that crazy stuff because there's only so far we can push things before it just gets way like the risk to reward ratio is out of
Yeah.
whack at that point. So
Yeah,
that's awesome.
we learned early that like we got to be careful. Like there was this one incident where my buddy Dave, he had done like fire burns and stuff before, and he really wanted to do it in the backyard, and we did. And the thing he was wearing didn't come off quick enough, and it like burned his. So we were like, okay, we learned like and then we had like zero fans at that time. It was just something he wanted to try, and I was way into it because I'm like, oh my god, the footage is gonna be amazing. Of course, let's do it. So yeah, that was so since then, I went to stunt school, I went to wrestling school, like I've learned how to do all these things now so we could do them in like we ever do stuff like this again because we since backyard wrestling we ran a viral video stunt team because we are still chasing that backyard rush, that adrenaline rush. And so we did crazy stuff, and it was nicer because it wasn't a full match. It was just like we take that one crazy moment from the match and then just do it as a clip and then sell that to TV shows. So it was an easier way to do it. But yeah, it was all about just trying to top each other and stuff eventually. And luckily no one got seriously injured, but it was close a couple of times.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like I always say, like, if you like basketball, you're gonna go out and play basketball. If you like
Oh yeah.
wrestling, let's go backyard wrestle. But when you're playing basketball with your friends, you don't have to risk like paralysis. So there's a bit of a trade-off there.
To an extent. So one of my arguments is I was on this TV show called The Doctors, and they kept calling me a horrible person, and I tried to explain that like, look, like high school football, in my opinion, is more dangerous than backyard wrestling. Because in backyard wrestling, yeah, we're beating the crap out of each other, but I mean, spoiler alert, we're working together to put on the show, right? Most people, some people never really got it. They never really got the concept, and they'd hit you right in the jaw, and you're like, but for the most part, we were all working together and practicing these moves and trying to not get. We could have used better training, but the ultimate goal was to not get hurt. It was the illusion of pain, the illusion of injury, and so we're working together, right? Whereas in football, you're running full speed, and someone you don't see comes and takes out your leg, right? Or tackles you to the ground, and you're snapping, ankles or like. I feel like there's more danger there. You're slamming your head, like it's the uncontrolled nature of it to me I thought was either just as dangerous or more so. Not that it's bad, but I'm just saying that like, we for the amount of crazy stuff that we've done over the years and the lack of serious injury, like you get cuts and bruises and stuff, you get that anywhere. But like I felt we were fortunate and lucky, but two, there's also something to it that like we're constantly putting ourselves in the way of danger and walking away from it was such a testament to like, it's not as dangerous as some of the other sports out there, some of the other teen activities and stuff.
Yeah. And how long did you backyard wrestle for?
I started in, I think it's like my freshman year of high school, so it was like 96.
Oh,
And then I did it all through high school. And then I started going to wrestling school while I was a senior in high school. And so I did it for like 4 years roughly. I probably stopped just short of 4 years because they found out at the place I was training to be a wrestler that I was still back at wrestling. And they're like, don't do that. You're going to get injured and then you're going to fuck up your career and you're not going to be able to train with us because you're going to be injured. So just don't do it. And I was like, all right, I'll do one more match and then I'm out. And then, but I still stung or like hung out with the community, the backyard wrestling groups, because we were still doing shows in my backyard and we were still doing shows all over up and down the coast and stuff. And so I would just like record, just run camera for everyone, and on a rare occasion, like jump in and give someone a bump or something like that as a fun little moment. But like for the most part, I was just like hanging out and recording everything because they were still all my friends, and many of them are still my friends to this day.
Awesome. So when you went to wrestling school, did you keep that you backyard wrestled a secret and they found out, or were you open about that?
Oh yeah, I tried.
Hmm.
But part of the problem though was I was on MTV True Life. I'm a backyard wrestler, and I was one of the main like featured people in that, so that kind of ruined it. And then I was also buddies with this guy Youth Suicide, who also he was also on the MTV True Life, and he's a lawyer now, which is awesome. And he was also in XPW with me. And so, but he was training with Supreme, so he was part of it like a different class. He had like a special class, because they were doing a thing where like, hey, let's take backyard wrestlers and turn them into pros. And then he was like one of the first ones to do that. But so we still like people knew we knew each other, and so once it really got out that he was backyard and then I was backyard, it was just like knock it off, like they were kind of but firm about it.
Was there ever a fear that like if these guys find out I'm backyard wrestling, I might not get the same opportunity? They may not treat me the same way as everybody else. Was there ever that stigma in your mind?
I that stigma was definitely there. But I never felt it really because I went in with a completely open mind. I was like, look, I know we've probably been doing it all wrong. And the advantage that doing backyard gave me was I was used to taking bumps already. And so most people would it would take them 3, 4 weeks to really get like a good bump going. And me, I was like diving, like jumping into the air and then taking these huge, massive bumps every single time, to the point where they started having me train new people who couldn't figure out how to bump correctly. They had me start training them. So they saw it as like a positive, that I was completely open, and was like, no, everything I do is wrong. Let me learn the right way. So I never let it become like a stigma, because some people come in and think they know everything. That used to backyard, and they're like, oh no, I know how to do this, and then they do it wrong, and then they get shit on, and then it becomes so it's really an attitude thing, right? If you come in with a completely open mind and you're willing to learn and willing to be, awesome, then yeah, they're all into it. They think it's great. But if you come in like you think you know something, then you've got a problem.
Okay. Was it hard for you to like relearn how to wrestle and break any bad habits you had from backyard wrestling?
Not really. I think we did a pretty good job as far as like teaching ourselves, and I didn't really develop any major bad habits that I remember, but no, I was completely open to like, this is how to do it, this is how they do it, this is how it should be done. And then two, part of the goal was that me and You Suicide, we were gonna take what we learned back to everyone in the backyard, and then so we ran. He really like took the spearhead on that, and I just helped out from time to time. But we ended up buying a ring and teaching all most of the backyard people how to do it and stuff, and running through drills, and then they became great, and then they became the first iteration of UEW, Underground Empire Wrestling, I think it was called something like that. Underground Extreme Wrestling, I don't recall. It's been many years. I've been hitting the head a lot. They started running like actual legitimate like indie shows, and it was great. And then now that fed has like blossomed into something much bigger locally. So yeah, I think that it's so neat how starting from like nothing into where everyone kind of ended up is pretty awesome.
Yeah, definitely a lot of parallel lives going on because the same thing kind of happens with me, and it's like, wow, I
Oh,
went
cool.
from over here to here. Like it's insane when you look back at like every twist and turn. You're like,
Oh yeah.
this wouldn't have been on my bingo card, but I'm here for it.
One random person you met over here 7 years later led to a big moment of your life, and it led to this big, huge, crazy thing. So like, yeah, it's like that's what life is all about, is like meeting people, planting seeds, having experiences, and those seeds sometimes sprout to like really cool stuff, and sometimes they don't, or they haven't yet. Like it's going out there and experiencing these things, and learning, and meeting people in different walks of life and the way people are. Like it's so fascinating to me, and so fun, and such a neat thing that's led to all the cool, crazy stuff I've done in my life, is just through meeting fun people and cool people and doing cool things.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, no, I backyard wrestled, obviously. I went
Yeah.
to wrestling school, found out, oh, I'm not an athlete, and I
Yes.
couldn't
Yeah.
quite cut
Same.
it.
Yeah.
But then since then, I've gotten to do all these things in the wrestling space.
Yeah.
I've done videos with Pro Wrestling Revolution out here in San Jose. I
Love
got
it.
to work with All Japan. I made a documentary about Jun Akiyama and Ultimo Dragon and Tajiri. I
That's
worked with Indie
badass.
Handshake on their Michael Modest documentary they did a few years ago. So even though like I didn't go pro, I'm still
Yeah.
like tangentially connected to the
Oh, for
wrestling
sure.
industry, and it all started from backyard wrestling. And every time I look back, I'm like, that's so
Mhm.
crazy to like see how we started from like the smallest stage possible to all these things that blossomed from it.
Oh, for sure. And two, for me, like it was a big thing for my personality, because growing up in high school, like I had zero personality, and I was like not timid, but I was just quiet, and just because I didn't really have a whole lot to say, and I didn't have, my friends were very cool and very like cool. So they were outspoken for me kind of thing, so I didn't really need to be. But backyard wrestling, because you go out there and like that's on you. Like you've got to perform, you've got to make it interesting, you've got to do this, whatever you're doing and make it cool. And that led to me like developing a personality and being able to like talk and chat for hours. And now I'm going up on stage on Friday and gonna do some really horrible stuff with thumbtacks and all, all of that is like thanks to like backyard wrestling and the confidence and the personality that it's like instilled in me.
Yeah, and then you mentioned being on MTV's True Life, I'm a Backyard Wrestler. What was that experience like? How did that even come about? Like, how did that opportunity present itself? And then what was it like having MTV there filming you guys?
So when we filmed it, we had no idea it was for MTV. We had no idea what it was. We had people filming documentaries with us all the time. Like there was four distinct groups of people who would come to every show, or they'd like want to, hey, can we go film some like B-roll or interviews and stuff like that. So it was something that was like kind of constant. And mo for the most part, most of them were just like, oh yeah, it's playing at this like art house, or it's we're doing a small little festival screening if you want to come. So it was never anything huge, and we were on Weekly World News once. That was like one of the biggest, like, oh, this is awesome. But so this guy Cosmic Smasher, who's also in the special, we knew him through another Fed. He hit us up and was like, hey, can I use your backyard and some of your wrestlers for a show I'm putting on? We have a documentary crew coming. It's gonna be great. And we're like, okay, yeah, sure, sounds good. But we didn't think it was really going to be anything, so we didn't like heavily promote it. We didn't have a ton of people because we figured he was going to handle all that. And we had a few friends come by and stuff who loved all the shows, but we didn't really make a big deal out of it. Because at that time we were getting 70, 80 people in our backyard, and it was this big thing. But because it was his show and he was handling it, we didn't think much of it. So we did it. We did the show. There was some drama, and then we moved on. And so a year later, we got hit up and they're like, "Hey, MTV's interested in the footage. Can we come by and film some interviews?" And it was like, "Yeah, sure." Filmed the interviews. Everything went great. They just asked us about everything. And then it was a couple months later, we got a notice saying like, "Hey, on Friday it's going to air on MTV." We're like, oh my God, that's crazy. We recently graduated high school at that point. So it was just like, I was bummed that it didn't come out while we were in high school because that would have been like a really nice social bump, but that's okay. So yeah, and then I was expecting it to be us and like five other groups, just a documentary about backyard wrestling. I didn't know what it was. And then we started watching it, and then Mick Foley shows up. We're like, what the hell is this? And then the entire thing is about us. And that was like mind blowing because I thought for sure we would just be montage because like we had done like news reports where they showed a few clips from us and a few clips from some of the other local guys and stuff. And it was like they didn't really care about who was who and what was what. It was just montage stuff. And so we were expecting that. And the fact that it was entirely about us was like mind blowing. And I was also like, damn, I really should have promoted that show so that it looked like even bigger. But it was filled with drama. And my mom slapping you suicide. So, what are you gonna do?
Yeah, it's a trip because the copy that is on Backyard Wrestling Central's YouTube
Yeah.
page was actually the version I taped off of TV when it aired, and it used
Oh,
to be
huh.
on my channel, and I guess YouTube blocked it, and at some point Backyard Wrestling Central like ripped it and reposted. So all those like commercial break blips that are in there were from
Uh-huh.
me pausing the tape trying to
Oh,
cut
that's
out the commercial
crazy.
breaks while I was recording it.
That's awesome.
And it's like I can't get mad like how dare you repost this thing I bootlegged? But it's just I'm always just like at least it's still out there. At least people can still watch it.
Oh, for sure. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and then
Making sure
and
the
then
stuff is still out there is
yeah,
important.
and then you got like the last line of the program where you're like I had fun at the event.
And it's funny when we were filming it, like, yeah, it was like right in the middle of the chaos. And I had known, I was like, I want like a stinger moment, like a little funny line. And while I was sitting there, I was trying to think of like, okay, what can I say? What can I say? What can I do? What would be funny? And then, yeah, that one came, the camera like finally came over to me and I was like, I had fun at the event. And then they like chuckled and kept moving. And I was like, yeah, we'll see. And then the fact that it was the final line of the thing, I'm like, oh, yes, I did it.
Yeah, that was perfect.
It was
Um,
funny.
at some point, you also got involved with like video editing and video production, right? And then you worked for Big Vision. Just recently, you were
Mhm.
working for Giphy,
Yeah.
Jiffy, however you're supposed to pronounce that.
Jiffy.
Always
Yeah. I
start-
don't make peanut butter. We're not Jiffy.
There you go. So how did you get involved in video editing and video production? Like, what led you down that path?
Backyard wrestling. So the guy who handled the booking production side of stuff, he was a pretty good editor too, really good making promos and stuff like that. And then the stuff that he made was great, but he was a busy guy. And so it would take that, and our technology back then was just horrid. So it would take forever for him to make something. A 30-second spot would take like 6 hours to export. So like it was they were rough times back then, back in the Premiere 3.1 days. So he would edit everything, and I was just like, oh man, we should have like intro videos and have a monitor out and play and he was like, dude, I don't got time for that. So I was like, okay, I need to teach myself how to edit. And so I bought a camera, and the camera came with like Sony Vegas, I think, and I messed with that for a little bit and kind of got how placing clips on a timeline and transitions and all that work. And then I started learning on something else, and then eventually I went to Premiere. And yeah, it was just like I really like doing this. I really like taking all this raw footage and making stories out of it, and it was so like important to me. And then also it was something I was like, well, one, this could be a backup career if the pro wrestling stuff doesn't work out, that I could even do from a wheelchair if things go really bad. As long as my eyes and my hands work, we're good to go. And so I was like, this is a legitimate backup that if nothing else turns out, then I've still got this, and it's a skill because I had seen, especially when I was in XPW, I had seen so many people that I idolized growing up that I was just such huge fans of, like, kind of broken by that point. And, they had, pro wrestling had eaten them up and spit them out. And they were, they would have to take a ton of painkillers just to get through a match. And then they'd, pass out when we all went out to dinner afterward, and I was just like, I don't know if this is for me. And I finally made it, right? I was, wrestling pro. And then I was just like, I don't know, man. Maybe this is a hobby because seeing these people who made it to the top or made it really far, as broken people and with really nothing to go back to, like, and you see when people stop wrestling and they were a name for themselves, and then they go and they're like a manager of a restaurant or something, and people like shit on them, and it's like, dude, they gotta live too, and I didn't want that, and I wanted something cool that I could, like, do as well. And it's worked out really well for me. I started, editing our backyard wrestling stuff and making like separate promos and intro videos and all this other stuff. And then that led to me doing, with No Mercy Video, the stunt team that a buddy and I created. I was editing all of our promos and our videos and reels and stuff. And then then I went to Full Moon Features, which was they do like B horror movies and stuff. And I got a job in the shipping room, and I was like, hey, I'm an editor. If you ever need a chance, I could edit something. And then that eventually worked out, and I became, a video editor there. And then I went to Big Vision and worked on, like PWG DVDs promos and trailers, and did QA for all the DVD, all that kind of fun stuff. And then I went to Fox ADHD, which is like an animation studio, and lied and said I knew how to do animation compositing, and then learned it in a week. And then we were good. And then yeah, from there I went to Giphy. I was there for 8.5 years until they did a mass layoff recently. So
Ah,
now I'm on to my next adventure, whatever that's going to be.
well, there you go, man. You definitely got the talent. Because I mean, you look at everything you've done, and like you were on the Gong Show, Wipeout, America's Got Talent, the Go Big Show. Like you talked about how backyard wrestling kind of helped you develop a personality and
Mhm.
come up and be more comfortable in your own skin, basically. Um, your appearance on the Go Big Show led to you getting a match on AEW Dark against
Yeah, which was
against
like
10.
shocking because so whenever you do shows like that, usually you work with a producer, and the producer kind of like works with you to hone your act and make it great. So my thought was like, oh, I'm just gonna do an act I do called the human tackboard, which is where I do a strip tease down to my underwear. I throw 5,000 thumbtacks on the floor, and then I take multiple bumps into them, back, stomach, head, fist, whatever. And I've done that all around the world and stuff at, like Italy, France, Romania, Spain, Germany, a bunch of places. And so I thought I was just going to do that again. They're like, no, we want to do something different because that's been on TV a lot. Let's do something like bigger. And I was like, okay. And we went through like 20 different ideas, and like half of them would have killed me. Or like seriously, I'm like, I can't take throwing stars to the back, and I don't dig the cultural appropriation. So maybe let's not do that one. But then we settled. They were like, well, you're a pro wrestler. Cody Rhodes is a pro wrestler. Let's do a pro wrestling thing. And I was like, oh yeah, that'd be awesome. And so yeah, we came up with that bit where I staple gunned a bunch of like rejection letters to myself, because the whole thing was like, this is a pitch to get me and my buddy Howdy Price into AEW. Because the whole speech was something along the lines of like, my act is for everyone, but my message is for you. You see, Cody, much like you, I am a professional wrestler.
Mhm.
But unlike you, I've never seen my name in the spotlight. I've never headlined a show. I've never even won a belt. And that's why I'm coming to you today, because I feel that blah 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 blah. And the idea was that like, hey, I'm great. Let me prove it. But they wanted all stunts and all like craziness and stuff. So I staple gun a bunch of stuff to myself, and then they didn't air it, but I did a bit where Howdy Price comes out and beats me down with a barbed wire chair, and that was the thing that hurt the most that night. And I was so bummed they didn't air it. And then I did the thing where I'm like, now I'm gonna reach for that brass ring and climb the ladder of success and blah 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 blah. And then I get up to the top of the ladder, and I'm like, is there a spot for us? Because if you tell me no, I'm going to dive into this pit, this pit of despair below. And it was like a table with like 20,000 thumbtacks on it. And he was like 100% no. And then I was like, I figured that was, I had a thing in my head. I was like, if he says yes, which would be awesome, then I'm like, yeah, and then fall through the table, like a celebratory idiot fall through the table. And then if he says no, which was the most likely scenario, I just dive through it. And so, but it was one of those things where he like tore us apart, and to the point where I'm like, oh man, this is this is pretty rough. I ended up getting the lowest score in show history because he gave us a 2 out of 100. And so yeah, it was definitely a rough scenario. But then afterwards, he's like, but look, you've got something. So I tell you what, I'm going to give you a chance. I'm going to give you a match on AEW Dark and blah, blah, blah. And we were amazed, but it was also like, yeah, I've been promised stuff like that a lot and nothing's come of it. But at backstage, nearly every person we talked to was like, oh my God, that was amazing. Cody is a man of his word. He will definitely do it. So be ready. We're like, all right. So I went on a diet and I started like working out because and yeah, it was Thanksgiving, and I was chatting with the family and stuff. We're having a good time, and I got an email saying like, "Hey, in a week or two, you're going to be reporting to Florida for AEW Dark." And we were like, "Holy shit, it's happening!" And yeah, it was great. We got to go out and hang out backstage, and everyone was really fucking cool. It was one of the coolest like locker rooms I've been a part of. It's beaten only by Freak Show Wrestling, which look it up on YouTube. There's clips. It's great. But yeah, it was such just a neat experience to be able to, and I probably wasn't ready for it. I probably, I hadn't wrestled like 3 years at that point. So I was a little rusty, but it was funny. And that's what we were going for, was like funny and humor and dopey and whatever. And I think we crushed it. Even to the point where they didn't show, but after the match, Tony Khan came out and was like, I don't care what Dave Meltzer says. That was a 6-star match. That was amazing. I loved it, blah, 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 blah. He gave us a ton of praise, and I thought he was making fun of us because I saw the match. I was there. And I rolled out of the ring and we went to the back, and he came back up and was like, "Oh my God, I haven't seen selling like that since 1970 with this guy." And he was like just showering us with praise, and I was like, "Oh wow, he's like a really cool, genuine guy. Like he actually did like the match. That's great." They never invited us back, but that's okay because that's the problem with AEW is there are like so many talented people there that like how could I compete? So I get it, but I was just super thankful to one have a match, and then we had a really fun story arc on Being the Elite on YouTube, their sketch comedy show. It was, yeah, ton of fun. Love that experience.
That's awesome because you went from arguably the smallest stage you can, someone's
Hmm.
backyard, to one of the largest stages, which was AEW. Like that is
Yeah.
an incredible journey. Does it ever dawn on you like maybe I shouldn't be here? I should have got the wrong guy. Like, do you ever suffer from imposter syndrome with all these amazing things you've done?
I did growing up, especially when I was working at like Full Moon, because I'm a self-taught editor and I never went to school for it. So I had that for a while, but then once I started working for the animation studio and I was working alongside other editors and we were all on the same page, I'm like, okay, cool, I got this. I'm not a fraud. I got that. And then with the performance stuff, the first time, yeah, because it was just like a talent agent hit me up on Facebook and was like, hey, I saw a clip of you walking on mousetraps. Do you want to do something like that on America's Got Talent? And I was like, yeah, how about you know, go down to my underwear and land on 5,000 thumbtacks? They're like, great, we'll see you in New York in 2 weeks. I was like, what? Okay. And it was like, I had done thumbtack bumps before, but not that many in such a quick succession. So I was like, oh, we'll see how it goes. And it went great, and it was fun, and it's led to so many other ones. But yeah, it's one of those things where like for a moment I do, but then I see kind of I'm working alongside people and it's going well, and they're not like constantly berating me for like, oh, why'd you do it like that? I feel like I know what I'm doing. And it wasn't that way for a while, but I've kind of come over that, and I feel great about it now. And I know that like no matter what I do, I'm gonna go out there and make people react in some way. They're either gonna be like, oh, what the hell? They'll be like, yeah, like any reaction is good as long as it's not boredom, right? That's the one bad reaction. You can have people boo you and be pissed off and whatever, and that's fine because that's wrestling, that's life. But as long as you're making people feel something, I feel like you got a chance up there.
Absolutely. Um, back in the day, backyard wrestling had this real negative stigma. WB had the "Don't try this at home." There was the
Yeah.
best of backyard wrestling tapes that were everywhere, and it was very frowned upon. But now you see more and more people open up about their own backyard wrestling experiences. I saw a clip
Hmm.
from the Undertaker's podcast where he said that he backyard wrestled.
Yeah.
I never would have had that on my bingo card of
Nope.
Undertaker being a backyard wrestler. Has your opinion of backyard wrestling changed over the years?
No, because I've always thought it's awesome. I think it's a really good, right? Because there's the jocks, right? There's people who play football. There's people, and they get the feeling of defeat and victory. They get camaraderie with friends. They get social status. There's a lot you get from like sports and stuff. And for a lot of the people who backyard wrestle, they're never going to play football. Right? Some will, of course, but they're never going to be. Right? I was on the wrestling team in high school for like a year and a half, and I was horrible. I was just the worst. And so I wasn't feeling that there, but it's kind of like the island of misfit toys. Like it's a place where people who like aren't the most athletic, aren't the funniest, aren't the everyone's got an equal chance, it feels like, to like do something cool, to find their thing, find what it is that makes them special, and in a safe-ish environment. Depends on who you're wrestling with. Some people are pricks and they don't get it, and they're clocking you for real, and you're like, all right, well, we're doing this, that's great. But for the most part, right, it was such a beautiful learning experience. And as long as you know your limits, and as long as you aren't being stupid about it, and really putting yourself at like great serious risk, because there's always risk no matter what we do. Driving in a car, there's a risk. But as long as you know your limits, you're working together with people. But it teaches you how to win, how to lose, how to be great at both. It teaches you friendship, and I all the cool things in my life and all the like people that I know that I really like, 95% of them have come from backyard wrestling. And my life would be in a very different place without it. So I am very thankful for the time, and I thought we did some really cool stuff, and I've made friends for life, and you know, I wouldn't change a thing. I think that the backyard wrestling stuff was awesome, and I really, you know, I have zero negativity about it. If someone else tells me they want to do it or they're doing it, I'm like, great, be safe, have a great time. You know, learn all the aspects of it.
Hell yeah. All right, well, we're coming up to our time here, Leroy. Before we get out of here, where can people find you? How can people book you? Where can people reach out to you at? Go ahead and plug your socials, plug your contact info, so we can make sure we get some bookings on your books.
Yes. That'd be great. So yeah, if you go to leroyflix.com, which is Flix like Netflix, it's got my editing reel, it's got all my skills and all the other fun stuff I do, my resume. So if you're looking for editing references, that'd be a great place to go. I'm on all the social medias, Facebook, Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, you know, all of them, Twitter, whatever. I'm just either Leroy Patterson or Human Tackboard if you want to look me up there. Um, yeah, I mean that's kind of, you can check out my Giphy page. You look up Leroy Patterson on Giphy, and I've got just a ton of just dumb crazy things I've made. Or even if you just want to send a GIF of me, that's always fun. Just you know, go to the GIF button and type in Leroy Patterson, and you'll see a ton in there. And you know, I'm always doing stupid stuff, and I'm shirtless in half of them, so it's good times.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Leroy. This was an awesome interview. I really appreciate you taking time out your day for this.
Of course, one more thing I want to pitch. Right now, you're listening to this amazing podcast, right? You're about to turn it off. It's been excellent. You're gonna go to Tubi, right? And you're gonna look up a movie called The After Dark. And it's a vampire Romeo and Juliet kind of thing, but people get their throats ripped out and heads cut off by skateboards. It's great. I'm in it. I do some fighting and some killing. So yeah, check it out. The After Dark on Tubi.
Hell yeah, absolutely. Everybody's got Tubi now. So check out After Dark. Check out Leroy Patterson. Get him some bookings. Thank you so much, Leroy. You're awesome.
Of course, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you. Take care.
Anytime.